It's a beautiful day in middle of June, and we're in my garden. The Master Gardeners thought this year we might try to do some virtual garden tours since things have been paused and we can't meet as large groups. So I didn't want to give you a tour of my whole garden, but I thought I would start with a new area that I'm working on. I started this, I think, last year. And this is going to be eventually a pollinator, let's call it a meadow or a bed. I want it to be kind of self-maintaining, if there is such a thing in the garden world. And last year I had a couple of trees in the back that needed to come down. One was windstorm damaged, some other ones are being strangled by grapevines, so I got them cleared out. I started over here with some native 9-bark. So I've got a bunch of native 9-barks in here. My goal is to make this mostly native plants. Got a few that aren't for now, the gold thread, but need some evergreens in here, and also some color for me. So evergreens, of course, provide shelter and nesting places for birds, gives you winter interest. So in addition for this being for the pollinators, the insects, and the birds, it's also for me. So this was basically a large area that garlic mustard had infiltrated and infested. This was all garlic mustard last year. I actually did spray some of the seedlings last fall with an herbicide, and it did kill them, but then later this spring, the seeds in the soil germinated. So I've been weed whacking and pulling those to clear a space. And then this part was what I planted last year. And my thought was to sow in some white clover. No, white clover is not native, but the seed is relatively inexpensive compared to trying to seed some kind of native ground cover. My thought was if I could get this established, the garlic mustard won't have a chance to seed in, and it should also keep the seeds in the ground from germinating. So I bought some native plants. They're in here. I've got some Asclepias. This is swamp milkweed for the monarchs. We've got some different asters. There's some other plants in here that I just added a few in last year to see how it would work. Seeded the clover last year and it's grown quite well. The perennials were able to come up through it this spring. So that's going to be my plan. And you can see I got a little garlic mustard on the edge that I can pull. But overall this spring, I've done a little bit of weeding in here. Not a lot. There was a little bit of garlic mustard, a little bit of sticky bed straw, some of the dame's rockets. And then the other thing I like about the clover is, of course, they bloom. And the bees and the pollinators love clover. And so do other animals because somebody's been snacking on them. So my goal is to do patches of these, do drifts of different native plants, and then seed in the white clover. So here's a patch I started this spring. We have common milkweed in the back and Sullivan's milkweed. I put this in a couple weeks ago and then seeded with clover, and you can see the clover is already starting to come up. Hopefully the milkweed will continue growing and not get overwhelmed by the clover. That's one concern I have, but we'll see. And then this is some newer plants that I've put in the last week or so. We've got some aromatic aster, some lupin, some liatris. All right, I did put in a non-native annual. This is amaranth. I bought it for another spot in the garden, but I didn't have room for it, so I decided to put it out here for this year. Got Culver's root. This is the white flowered Culver's root. Some showy goldenrod that I've got started. You may be wondering why I'm planting goldenrod. Well, this showy goldenrod is going to be a clumper. It's not going to be a spreader like our Canadian goldenrod over here. The goldenrod is great for native insects. When it blooms in the fall, it's beautiful. It's great for pollinators. The flowers provide pollen and nectar. I've got another loop in here. And then last night I put in some coneflower. And you may be wondering, what's up with all the crates? Well, it's to protect newly planted plants from critters who like to dig. It also can help protect newly planted plants from the sun. You know, it gives them a little shade. This is pretty much it's an eastern exposure, so it gets sun in the morning. It gets a little bit of afternoon sun because I took out some trees at the top, so it gets some afternoon sun. Well, as I've been working on this, I decided I also needed some paths, so I used just some mulch. I like to use the cedar mulch, and I've got at least one path in here. Over on this side we have it's at the end of its blooming season, but this is a white camellia. Almost forgot the name. Got some Joe Pye weed that seeded itself in here. A couple that I've got to get out because they've got viruses. There is some giant fleece flower, not native, but it got moved last year when I didn't have any place for it, so we'll see. Even though it's not native, the pollinators, the small pollinators, really like the flowers when there's bloom. So it may get to stay. It might just be a nice big showy plant. Still got some work to do with a little bit of clearing of grapevines. Added another 9-bark this spring, which is currently in bloom, as you can see. And I fenced this basically for the same reason I put crates on other things, is so things don't dig around it. The raccoons tend to like to dig wherever I've newly planted something. This is Callicarpa, Spicebush. That flower is on its way out. We've got a couple of buds. I think I saw, yes, here's a flower down here. So this is the Callicarpa Spicebush. There's another shrub with the common name of Spicebush. This will get to be big. If you've ever been to the Erie Botanical Gardens, they have some of them growing outside in their outdoor garden. It'll be big and showy in a couple of years. And then, this path. So what I decided was around the shrubs, I wanted some mulch so I don't have to get too close with a weed whacker. The mulch will also help conserve soil moisture when the soil gets dry. And then what I like to do when I'm doing big areas is lay down cardboard, cover it with a couple inches of mulch, and that helps smother out any weeds underneath it. Now, I did have this fairly well weed whacked, but you can see this is what the garlic mustard looks like even after you weed whack it. So this is kind of an experiment for me, seeing how we can get the garlic mustard under control, but also to create, a better native habitat where I just had an invasive plant. So we've also got, all right, so here you can see this is what happens when the garlic mustard moves in. All that tall green, it's all gone to seed. If I want to get rid of it now, I've got to pull it. It's in there with my ostrich ferns. I've got a Canada anemone that I put in last year. That's a clumping anemone. This is white woodland aster, so it's actually an aster that likes shade. So I put in a group of 5 in this area. They should fill in nicely, and they'll have some shade from the 9-bark. Some more camellia that's gone, garlic mustard that needs to be weeded out. So I'm debating here if I'm going to put the clover in or just mulch it like the rest of this bed. I've got some more small ferns starting over in here that I put in this spring. I've got forsythia, which eventually I would like to replace. I also have a lot of black walnuts around. So the 3 main trees, well, actually 4, These are all black walnuts. I have a catalpa tree there. I garden under black walnuts a lot on my property because I have quite a few of them from nuts being spread around. And some things, I'm finding out which things do well and which don't. I also added some mountain mint last year. This is another goldenrod and an aster. Oh, and our Joe Pye weed. Got some Joe Pye weed over here. So I love Joe Pye weed. It's got big puffy pink blooms later in the summer, quite tall. And then just a juniper, another addition to the garden that I liked in the garden center, but then it didn't have a home, so it got moved here. But you know, they make a nice vertical accent, as well as they're evergreen, and the birds can use them as they get bigger, and the deer don't seem to bother the junipers, so may have to put some more in. And then my wheelbarrow garden, which I started just because I like sedums and I don't have a good spot to grow sedums. So this gets full sun. Sedums aren't native, but it's okay in here. And then a cinquefoil that decided to seed itself in here. And I was pretty excited because I did this last year and they all overwintered in the wheelbarrow. And then, oh, this is a new addition this year. Wild Petunia. It's supposed to be a ground cover. It has little purple petunia flowers. It's supposed to be fragrant. I did mail order that from a native plant online. And then I added some coral bells. There are coral bells that are native. I'm not sure if these ones are the native ones or not. But the hummingbirds do like the flowers. So just wanted to give you a little virtual garden tour here of what's going on in my backyard and how I'm creating a garden for pollinators this year. And we'll do some updates as things move along and fill in, and we'll see how my experiment with the white clover versus garlic mustard goes. All right, everybody. Well, have a good day.